All right. Welcome to another episode of The Close-Up, a part of the Orlando Magic HQ Network. My name's Stephen Cameron, and we got a really fun show today. We got Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic and Orlando Magic Daily. He joins me as my good friend. We always talk a few times throughout the season, and this is a fun one. You know, we recorded this Sunday, January 26th. The Magic just had an awesome game versus the Detroit Pistons the day before. We recap a bit about that. We talk about Paulo and Franz and how they looked coming back with their first game back together, or second game back together, really. And just, you know, we hit on the Jaylen Suggs injury, which is a really good kind of conversation about that game. And then we talk about the upcoming trade deadline, and we discuss questions that need to be answered about this team that the front office is probably looking to answer before the trade deadline on February 6th. We also talk about some of the trade targets we like and how they could affect the team and what it might take to get some of those trade targets. So if you listened to my show last week, if you haven't, I highly recommend that you do. I had Keith Smith on of Spot Track, who we got real nitty gritty. We talked about player salaries. We talked about draft capital. It was just a really good preview of the trade deadline. And this is just a continuation of that, a little bit more focused from a person who covers this team on a day-to-day like Philip Rossman-Reich does. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. I know I did. I really enjoyed it. But before we get to that, let's get to the people that help us make this possible. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball to NHL and UFC, BetOnline is the number one sport betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers, hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, every win. The Super Bowl is coming up. You can bet on that. There's going to be a lot of fun ones. I love talking about the coin flip. That's such a fun one. You know, you can do prop bets. You can bet on how long the national anthem might be sung. It's great. Bet online. The game starts here. Magic fans, listen up. Orlando Magic Radio Network pregame and postgame host Brandon Kravitz is live daily on 96.9 The Game with In the Zone starting at 3:30 p.m. on Magic game days. He stretches that show all the way to 6:30. with the final 30 minutes being completely Magic focused. So you want Magic content, you want a great game day preview, tune into 96.9 The Game. Want bonus content? Check out his Zone Heads podcast for weekly on-demand episodes. Zone Heads. Thank you, Brandon Kravitz, for being a great partner to us. Also, go ahead and check out our Patreon program. You can find it in the description below. It's really good. We're about to do a big giveaway for the Patreon subscribers, so you won't want to miss that. Jump on it now, see if there's a tier that fits right for you. All that support just allows us to do cool things like do giveaways and just keep our show operational. So we really appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Philip Rossman-Reich. What's going on, Magic fans? Like I said in the intro, we got my man Philip Rossman-Reich. He hasn't been on the show in a while. Philip leads Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic and a bunch of other stuff. He's the Associated Press for UCF, all sorts of things. Philip, it's been a while since you've been on the show. You are normally pretty on my show pretty regularly, but our schedules haven't aligned recently, and I'm psyched that we made it happen today. How are you doing tonight? I know you're in Miami. We're recording this on Sunday night. Magic play Miami on Monday. How are you doing? How's Miami feeling? Have you hit South Beach yet? Have you gotten your Cuban sandwich yet? What's going on, Phil?
I mean, I went like 2 blocks in the wrong direction to my hotel from the Brightline station. So I got a little bit of a tour of Miami, but almost went back to the hotel I was at last time, which was not as nice as the hotel I'm in this time. So excited for the game. I love this road trip down to Miami. Brightline was fun. First time on the Brightline and ready to get this game going. It's a big one for the Magic.
Yeah, it really is. And it feels like every game is a big one for the Magic at the moment.
That time of year.
Yeah. Considering also, like the 5-game losing streak that they just broke recently. So it's the standings are tighter, the cushion is gone, and they are in the playoff standing race at the moment. Last night was fun. The Magic it was the first game with like Paulo, Franz, and Jaylen Suggs all back. Franz had played one game before that on a pretty tight minute restriction. I think he played about 24 minutes his first game back. This was his second game, I believe. And then we had Jaylen Suggs back, which was great. He'd missed roughly 10 games or so with his back strain. So it was a much welcome sight for a team that has been injured for so long. It wasn't just injuries that hit the team. There was a lot of sickness and flu hitting the team. Cole Anthony had the flu. I think Anthony Black, Jonathan Isaac, like a bunch of people were getting sick all at once to the point where like there was a game that Jonathan Isaac tried to play and he just couldn't make it after like 5 minutes. Like, guys, I'm just not feeling it. And they basically had 7 guys or 8 guys in the rotation. It was like, it wasn't much. And those guys were like Corey Joseph, Caleb Houston,
it's all end of bench guys. Yeah,
just
it's
not
a
one
thing when you're down to 8 and it's Paolo and Franz and Jaylen. It's another thing when you're down to 8 and it's Paolo on a minute restriction, TQ. No offense to those guys, but like
little rough. It was a little rough. But last night versus the Detroit Pistons was fun. It was a good game. The first quarter, I think we all were really annoyed. We're like, what is this team doing? Then they hit the defense pretty hard in the second quarter, got back. Paulo was just doing his thing consistently. A really good game from Paulo offensively, in my opinion. And then, Franz Wagner just destroyed the fourth quarter and took over. And the Pistons had no response, no way of battling and coming back when Franz and Paulo really started doing what they needed to do in that fourth quarter. With this team, kind of like, before we get into that, what was your just overall thoughts and processes of game one with all those guys back? Jaylen got a little hurt. We'll talk about that in a second, but what did you like? What did you not like?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're expecting some bumps in the road. Like it's a lot of guys first game back. Like you're expecting that Franz would hit a little bit of a wall the same way that Paolo hit a wall in his return, but it was just good to have them back on the floor. You could really feel the energy of having them together. You could really feel the intensity, especially that Jaylen Suggs brings to that lineup, along with sort of the calm offensively that Paolo can bring. And while Franz was missing his shots early in the game, really the difference was the Magic opened that fourth quarter and they essentially just said flat out, we are not losing this game. They treated that like a playoff game that they had to have. They left their stars, they left their starters out there. Even with the minute restriction, they were going the distance. If Paolo and Franz need to play all 12 minutes in that fourth quarter, they were going to play all 12 minutes in that fourth quarter. And they willed the team to victory. And that is the thing that's been missing. Like, yes, Jaylen Suggs has had some nice games. Yes, Cole Anthony has had some nice games. But Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are 2 players that impose their will on the game. And that's the biggest thing the Magic have been missing, is just 2 players that the defense has to account for, that the team can count on every game. Like, even though Franz started 1 for 12, they have every faith that he's going to get going. And when he got on a roll, it was obviously game over. Paolo was like, I'm getting out of the way too. Like, you do your thing, Boogie. Look, it's been a while since we've felt like this team looked like the Magic. Outside of that first quarter, the Magic looked like the Magic again. And that was a really good sight to see.
Yeah, I loved it. I was able to watch it yesterday and I just it was just so fun. It's like, okay, this is what this team is meant to be. Like, we didn't have Paulo, Franz, and Suggs playing in a game together since game 5, right? That was the last time. So this is only the 6th game we've seen that trio together this year. And Jaylen Suggs had some foul issues, got into some foul trouble a little bit here and there, but overall, he was doing his thing.
He had 6 fouls in 24 minutes. He was going to use them.
He used and abused him. It was interesting, but and we'll get to Jaylen in a second. But when it comes to Paulo and Franz, I was just like super impressed because like there was a few games during that 5-game losing streak where Paulo was just, he might have put up 20 points, 22 points, but it just didn't look good. And things were off and a little sloppy there.
It felt like he was easing into the game.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, the Magic are so injured and teams were treating him like he's Paolo Banchero, which was how they should treat him. And Paolo wasn't Paolo yet. You could just tell like he was still kind of like getting back to the speed of the game, and teams just throw so much at him defensively that it looked like he was just still struggling to process things.
Totally.
And like he'd see it in spurts, but it just consistently wasn't there at the level that you expect in January, obviously, when teams are kind of more finely tuned. This game Saturday, he looked a lot more confident. He looked a lot more decisive. And I think honestly, like some of it was just getting rid of the pretense, like getting rid of the, oh, I'm coming back from injury. It was the only thing that matters today is we're going to win. And Paolo played like that. You know, Franz wasn't scoring, but he played like that. And I think the rest of the team felt that energy. The biggest disappointment that I've had since Paolo came back, and it's not all his fault, so I'm not like banging on him too hard here. But the biggest thing that I've been disappointed in is you get your energy from your best players. And because Paolo felt like he was just kind of easing his way into games, you could kind of feel that energy drop throughout the team. Like they just didn't have that extra oomph. And, you know, I think Franz had that a little bit on Thursday against Portland, but Paolo, you could just kind of see he was just kind of like, this is probably putting it too bluntly, but puttering along. He was just kind of there.
Sure.
And not imposing himself on the game. That changed completely Saturday. And if that's the light bulb that clicked, the Magic are going to be just fine.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because like I was trying to look at Paolo's return versus when Franz had to take over when Paolo left, and just kind of like tinkering a bit in my head on what the narratives that psychopath Magic fans are going to create in their head. And one of the things I was realizing was when Paolo went down, Franz was healthy. He had all of training camp, all summer, and a handful of games going in. He was already in his rhythm. When Paolo came back and Franz was out, he's coming back from injury. So it was like he didn't have that kind of runway that Franz had to kind of find himself again. And also the team was in a significantly different place when Franz was playing before, you know, the plague hit. He had Jaylen Suggs as a running mate. He had Mo Wagner as a running mate. They had Goga Batadze to protect the rim. Paolo comes back on this like 5-6 game stretch, and he doesn't have any of those guys. It was literally Trevelyan Queen and Caleb Houston and Corey Joseph.
The biggest thing that I would tell people, because like people were sending me like the Kirk Goldsberry thing from the last 10 games, and I'm just like, look, these are really small sample sizes.
Exactly.
Like, don't like throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know we live in a society that is very of the moment, that doesn't take a step back and look at the big picture all the time. This is a moment to take a step back and look at the big picture. You know, the Magic are right where they probably thought they would be when the injuries happened. You know, obviously the Magic set a very high standard. They excelled. They're struggling to kind of pick up steam. Like Jamal Mosley has said it numerous times. Like, we have accounted that we're going to have some hiccups, that these guys are not going to come back and be perfect and be at an elite level to start. The important thing is they still stack up wins when they can, but they're playing at a higher level in March and April heading into the playoffs. Like that's what's ultimately important for this team. It's just going to take some time. And, you know, they had this big breakthrough on Saturday. Like Saturday was a breakthrough to snap that losing streak, to finally kind of look like yourself. That's a huge breakthrough for this team. Now it's okay. Let's build it. Let's do another one. Let's get it going.
What I found before we move on, I found some interesting stats. Like, you know, digging in the box score, seeing what I saw visually and how it actually translated statistically, and a few things I saw relating specifically to Paolo and Franz. And I tweeted this out, but for those of you that don't follow me on Twitter or just missed it, Paolo and Franz had 14 combined assists. They each had 7, and they only accounted for 4 turnovers for those 14 assists. Paolo had 3, Franz had 1. They also both attempted the exact same amount of shots, 22, and they each scored 32 points for a combined of 64 points, which is phenomenal. They limited fouling to a combined 3 personal fouls, a total combined, and they both shot 50%.
That's saying something in that game.
It is. That was a very physical game, a game where fouls were getting called pretty loosely. Also, I love that they both were in control defensively there and offensively, because, you know, you can pick up fouls on the offensive side. But then the last thing I loved was they both shot 50% from 3. And the team as a whole shot better. I forget the stat off the top of my head, but I think they were like 37% from 3, which was really nice. Actually, hold on. I can look it up right here. The team shot...
I got one more stat for you while you're looking that up.
Yeah, the team shot
Paolo and Franz had 8 combined assists in the fourth quarter. They each had 4, I believe, in the fourth quarter. So they were doing everything to will that team to a victory.
They shot 45% from 3. Just when they went 40 of 80. No, wait, sorry. Am I reading that? No, that's way off.
No, that's way off.
Hold on.
I looked at the wrong thing. They did shoot better than 40% from 3 for the first time in 11 games. And it's the first time in 7 games that the Magic shot better than 30% from 3.
They shot 40% from 3, not 45. Yeah. They shot no, it was 45.
I can go grab my box.
No, I'm on it right here. I'm looking at ESPN. They shot 15 of 33.
Ooh, don't trust ESPN right now.
Is it bad? Okay, well,
ESPN's had some issues.
That's what ESPN says. They went 15 of 33, which is ridiculous. Yeah, yes. I mean, that's roughly 45%. So either way, the team shot better. It just was a really nice overall game for the Magic to kind of get their feet back underneath them, and they're going into a bit of a softer schedule. They start a road trip right now, a big 6-game road trip. So I mean, that's not necessarily soft, but the opponents that they're playing, there's not as many 500. They're playing Miami.
Manageable.
Then exactly. Then they go and play Portland. Then they're playing in Utah on February 1st. Then they play Golden State on the 3rd. I'll be at that game. I'm psyched. Then they play the Sacramento Kings on the 5th, which is the first night of a back-to-back. I might go to that game as well. And then February 6th, trade deadline day, is Denver, which is the end of their road trip before they head back home. So, it's a lot of those games are very manageable. Denver's going to be tough. Golden State has Steph Curry. You can never count them out. Sacramento Kings, they're a decent team. They got De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis. They're playing better. So there's some tougher opponents there, but there's also, they have a bit of a run they could go on.
Note.
What are you going to say?
After that road trip, 10 of the next 11 games at the Kia Center.
Which is nice.
They essentially are at home until the beginning of March. The only road game, I believe, is at Atlanta, the first game after the All-Star break.
So they have an opportunity. I think you and I are both, what we're trying to say is the Magic have an opportunity to go on a bit of a run, find themselves again, and push themselves in the standings.
The next 17 games are the season.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the season, but if the Magic are going to finish 4th in the East or in that 4-5 series,
has to happen now.
They're going to have to play very well in the next 17 games.
Yeah.
Like they'll have to go 12-5. It's doable. It's possible. It's very, very possible.
And the standings are still so tight. Like, not looking at the losses, but if you look at the wins, the Bucks have 25 wins. They're at 4th. The Pacers have 25 wins. They're at 5th. The Pistons have 23. They're at 6th. The Magic have 24. They're in 7th. So like, we literally have
the Magic have played the most games of the group.
Exactly. The Magic have played the most, so they have a little bit of ground there to an extent. But they have one less win than the Milwaukee Bucks at 4. So a lot of jumping can and will happen with all of these teams until the end of the season, which is, in my opinion, really fun. I love watching standings in January right now. Every game, every night, I'm looking,
lottery.
who do I not want to win tonight? So like, the other night it was like, or last night it was Clippers versus Bucks. I'm going after that. So that was a fun one. And the Clippers won. Good job. Thank you, Clippers. All right, cool. So, Philip, let's spend 30 seconds talking about Jaylen Suggs. He went down last night, his first game back. They reported today he's questionable with a thigh contusion. What do you know? What should we expect?
Yeah, so, I obviously don't know a whole lot. We did ask about him after the game, after Jamal Mosley spoke to the media. We were told at that point it was a sore left knee, which is just kind of a catch-all for, like, he's hurt, he can't play, he's out, he sat out the game. Well, they'd reevaluate him. They obviously reevaluated him, said it was a quad contusion. Quad contusion just means he got hit. There's like a bruising there. Knowing Jaylen Suggs, as long as it's not, like, deep muscle or, like, really severe, or especially at this point messing with his back, I am pretty sure Jaylen Suggs will do everything he can to play on Monday. We'll learn more at shoot-around. Obviously, it's just like get him on the court, see how he feels. That's always the kind of standard answer we get.
Right.
Knowing Jaylen Suggs, if he can walk, he can play. But we'll see. The Magic do have 2 days off here coming up before they head to Portland. They're in Miami today for the game on Monday. They're going to head home first, and then they'll go to Portland on Wednesday. So they got some time to kind of to get everyone right before they hit the road again. So maybe it is advisable to let Jaylen sit, let everything kind of heal up, buy that extra time. especially since you'll be on the road. But if I know Jaylen Suggs, if the injury is not super serious and he's feeling good, he will play.
I love that. I'm hoping he plays. If not, maybe rest a game and get at it at the beginning of the road trip. So, or the second part of the road trip. I guess the second
it's the
game
beginning
of the
road trip. Like this Miami game is this. I always hate how they do this. How they tack a Miami game, a Miami road game before or after these road trips. Like I remember I came to Miami for a game last year. It was the end of it was a 5-game, 9-day road trip or 11-day road trip or whatever it was. And I get to the building and I talk to a few Magic people, like, hey, how's the road trip been going? Like, how's the feeling? And I had more than one person come up to me and say, we were doing good on this road trip, but today we're feeling it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it's going to be one of those games.
Because you're so close from home, but you're not home.
It's, if you've traveled for any length of time, you just hit a point where the travel gets you. Where just eats you up. And that's the end of road trips are always difficult for that reason. It was a really nasty little road trip that they tacked a Miami road game on at the end. This one's coming at the beginning, so we'll see how they react. But it's the schedule makers make the schedule. You just play them.
Yeah, I'm excited because I live in California for the people that don't know. So this is my opportunity to see the Magic. I only get to see a few games a year, and yeah, I'm gonna go see them play the Golden State Warriors, and good chance I'll be running up to Sacramento to watch them play the Kings too. So always love that when they come out west, but I know it's hard for the Magic fans on the East Coast. I got to stay up late and I have no sympathy because Magic play at 4:00 in the middle of my workday over here. So yeah, anyways, let's get to the hot topic right now, the trade deadline. It's coming up quick, January 6th. We're going to kind of stage this conversation in 2 segments, right? First segment is, what do the front office need and us need to learn about this team before this February happens, where it's trade deadline day? The second part of the conversation is, what are some things that we might see on trade deadline day? So it's a little bit for the listeners. It's going to be staged. So Philip, I'm just going to repeat that right back to you. We're about a week or so out from the trade deadline. What do we need to learn? What do the front office, what do we think the front office is trying to learn now that this team is finally healthy again? We know this front office loves their evaluation, but this is a team that, in my opinion, was built to be a playoff team. They're expected to be a playoff team. And I went into this season, wow, this is the first season the Magic might be buyers, actually position themselves as, if it makes sense, it makes sense, but they might be aggressive. That all kind of changed during the last 4 to 6, 8 weeks when a lot of players were down. Franz and Paolo missing significant time, Jaylen Suggs, they just haven't really had a chance to see this team as a whole. So we know that the front office is going to be looking very closely over the next week and a half until the trade deadline and wanting to see certain things and how they are. In your opinion, what are some of those things? What are these questions the front office is trying to answer right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest question is, how good is this team? We don't I know we're 46 games, 47 games into the season. We don't know how good this team is. And a lot of that is because Paolo Banchero has been out since October. Franz Wagner's been out since December. Jaylen Suggs has been out for 2 weeks. We, like you mentioned at the top of the show, the 3 key players on this team had not played together since October 3rd before Saturday night's game against Detroit. So I think the biggest thing that the Magic have to learn or have to begin to watch and see is, are the things the team struggled with throughout the course of the season, is that something that is fixed by being healthy, or is that something that they just don't have? And I am talking about shooting, but I'm talking about a whole lot of other things. Can the Magic accomplish their goals with what they have? And they don't know that without seeing their guys in action. I will reject the premise of your question just a little bit, though.
Sure.
A week is not enough time to figure that out.
Yeah, and I agree.
And they'll obviously the deadline comes. It doesn't matter when it comes. It comes nonetheless. Run from it, hide from it. It comes nevertheless. So the Magic do have to make some decisions and think about some things, because surely their competition is going to make moves too. Things that they hope could be available in the summer could get taken out from under them. They have to plan. Wendell Carter is a pretty big trade chip the Magic might have. He's not tradable until the summer. So They have to decide, what assets are we willing to expend now? What can wait till the summer, till the offseason? At the end of the day, I would tell fans this. The biggest acquisition the Magic are going to make at the trade deadline, regardless of if they do anything, is Paolo and Franz coming back. Like, that is a huge addition. And so the question then becomes, as well, in addition to, like, what does this roster need long-term? Because I think the Magic are focused more on a 2 to 3 year window rather than this year. This year, it doesn't matter. Like, do they want to win? Yes. Are they expecting to win? Yes. Do they want to add someone to make sure they get the 5 seed? No, they don't care about that. What they care about is, are we better positioned to be a championship team next year and the year after? Are we better positioned to grow into what we hope to be as a title contender? And ultimately, that comes down to how can we make Paolo and Franz's life easier, and how much better are they going to get? We've already seen how much better they are this year, but they're the keys to the championship puzzle. And so the Magic have a lot to balance. It's honestly not easy to sit here and say this team has a clear picture of what they're going to do or what they need to do. They haven't seen any of it. And so what you hope to see is over the next week, and it's just a week, you hope to see over the next week this team begin to look more like itself. If they look like they did Saturday night, they'll probably be like, okay, we're fine. We can hold this ship steady. Let's see how this season plays out. If they look more like they did Thursday night against Portland, that tells you there might be some deeper issues, and that might mean it's time to tinker a little bit.
I hear that. I don't think there's much incorrect with that line of thought, especially with how we will potentially see things play out at the deadline. But I then I get a little bit tighter from my point of view. You gave a really good halo. I'm zooming in a little bit, and I start to look at players like Gary Harris, who hasn't played at all this year, really. I look at Cole Anthony. He's had some nice games, but he also got benched and was a third stringer for a good portion of the season. Even when the team was injured, he was still not trusted right away, and he's been a streaky player his whole career. I see someone like Caleb Houston, was supposed to be a shooter, hasn't really shot well in a while, including last year. I'm not going to pin the young guys like Jet Howard and Anthony Black. I think there are some up and down questions with them, but they just got drafted a year ago. Unless a trade is really too good to be passed down, I don't think they're in a rush to move those guys. But I look at, even a guy like Corey Joseph, he came in for vet presence. I think he's probably done a good job on that, but he's been pretty ineffective on the court. So I look at some of these on a little bit more of a micro scale, and I'm like, okay, is getting an upgrade on Cole and Gary to pair next to Anthony Black, who they're probably not going to move, is that really going to change the identity in a negative way of the team? Are they do they actually need to get more information on these two guys, or hasn't the track record of them being with this team for 5 years been enough yet? So when I kind of say that, how do you respond? What is your thought process when I'm talking about those things?
I think you've hit the nail on the head on what the Magic need to do. Everybody obviously thinks when you get to the trade deadline, let's go get the biggest name we can. Let's mix up the starting lineup. Honestly, when I look at this Magic team, the starting lineup's fine. Jaylen Suggs, yeah. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Goga Bitadze. That starting lineup works. It's successful. It hasn't played a lot, obviously, this year because Bitadze wasn't starting at the beginning of the season. He was actually hurt. He was injured before it was fashionable. But the team, I think, feels very confident that its starting lineup is a maybe not championship level starting lineup, but is a very good starting lineup. I agree with you completely. What needs to happen is the bench needs more punch. Especially with Mo Wagner out, you've lost your big offensive weapon off the bench and a guy who wants to score. In all those names that you mentioned, they've all got limitations. And we saw and experienced those limitations throughout the course of the last 2 months. If anything, the Magic adding a high-level bench player that can help them withstand injuries. We'll maybe get into some names here in a little bit, but, imagine if the Magic had Anthony Simons off their bench or Colin Sexton off their bench. Guys who, when they need to, have a scorer's mindset and can take over games. and can start when you need them to. Whereas instead, the Magic have Cole Anthony. And look, Cole had the game against the Heat, the comeback game against the Heat. He's had some big games for this team. He's, back to being decent Cole, but Cole Anthony's still a very limited player. He still has a lot of limitations. And you could just kind of feel the Magic squeezed in by some of those limitations. And the injuries only exposed the drop-off in talent, specifically offensive talent, when their top players are out. Now, I mean, look, you can't plan to have both of your top scorers out for months at a time. That just doesn't happen,
right?
Except for like really, really bad teams. You can't necessarily plan for that, but it did expose the Magic do need a little bit more dynamic players. They do need some more dynamic depth. And so I think you're right. Like the needs, this 3-point shooting is obviously a big need, but the needs for this team are abundantly clear. And now it's just about, how do we add the right guys and when do we add them? You mentioned like Gary Harris, you're right. He hasn't played. You're not disrupting chemistry if you trade him.
He's not long-term for the team anyways. Yeah, to go back to your point about the moves they're making being forward thinking as well.
You're not losing anything with him. I honestly, like, I'm going to write about this in the next couple of days. Because everyone thinks about, well, who are the targets? Who do you want to bring in? You also need to think about who are you sending out? What is the trade package you're shopping around? And I think very clearly it's Cole Anthony and Gary Harris is the trade package they would do to get a Sexton, to get a Simons, to get a Cam Johnson. And then it just becomes about how many picks do you want to attach to that, or how many picks are going to be asked to take that on. And then the question for the Magic becomes, well, how many picks are we willing to give up for this player? Are we willing to give up our picks now? Do we need a pick? Do we need to keep a pick in reserve to trade with Wendell Carter or to trade in the offseason? So those are real questions that the Magic have to ask and have to sort through, because you're right. There are a lot of, it feels like, replaceable players. And I think what we've seen this year is the Magic are good enough that they should be moving out of the we're focused on developing young players phase to the we need to have players that are ready to help us win and win immediately. And the Magic just don't have enough of them at this point.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I look at Anthony Black and Jett Howard, their most recent draft picks outside of Tristan da Silva, who I think I think they would even hold Tristan da Silva maybe a little bit more highly than possibly those two at this moment. Maybe I'm wrong there.
Probably not as high as Black.
Yeah, maybe not as high as Black. But then I look at, Jett Howard, someone who I still think he's not had a great year, but I still think there's a way for him to turn into a player that could help this team. But it goes right back to what you just said. Do they got time to develop that now, or or do they deal with just
time to develop?
They're not. They're not. There's plenty of situations where they don't prioritize him, even when the team is injured, and he could play, and he's either getting very limited run or no run at all. And it's like, okay, if you're not giving him opportunity now when they're so injured, and it is a perfect time for him to just go and get 25 minutes a game and see what he can do. But give him that for like 10 games straight instead of like one game and then not.
And he was starting to get it, but like,
a little bit.
He was starting to get that, and then he had the ankle injury.
Yeah.
But like his shooting also hasn't come around. Like he's a shooter, wants to shoot. He's kind of still got to get himself into rhythm a little bit, but like Caleb Houston, like he's a shooter who can't shoot, who's not a good enough shooter at this point. And that's the problem. Like those are clear players or player types you can upgrade. You can find better versions of out there. And that's what you have to start doing now.
So let's transition to question 2. Now that we have seen, or, that we've kind of talked about what we think they need to answer, scoring off the bench, which even was a question before Mo Wagner went down, in my opinion, and shooting, which I do think will balance out a little bit. We're never going to not so much that they'll be a top 10, but they will get better than where they're at with a healthier team shooting wise. We've mentioned a few. These are the names that have been floating around. Colin Sexton, Anthony Simons, Cam Johnson. Some people have like Brogdon on their target from
Kobe
the Wizards.
White.
Who else am I missing? There's a
Kobe
few others.
White from Bulls.
Kobe White, yeah, he's starting to shake loose as a trade target for, they've kind of let it known they would let him go. My question to you, let's have some fun. Let's play trade deadline. What do you think's going to happen? And then what do you want to happen and what it might take for it to happen?
So I think ultimately the Magic may do something small. Like they may trade Gary Harris to a team with cap room with like a second round pick just to free the roster spot. I suspect the Magic's biggest goal is to free up a roster spot for Trevelyan Queen so that he can get a full contract. Having said that,
slowly crying.
I know. I mean, he's earned it. He has earned it. They like him. If they don't like him, then that's actually a problem. They haven't used their
they
two-way
like him
slots.
better than Mac McClung and unused two-way spot.
And having said that, they have not used their two-way slots effectively. Mac McClung should have gotten an opportunity. He should have at least been with the team. They needed bodies, and he wasn't there. And they've left a two-way slot open when they clearly needed to just invest in a third center just to have in case of emergency. So, like the situation they're in now, where Wendell Carter and Jonathan Isaac are playing your entire center minutes. I'm not against Jonathan Isaac playing center, but when that doesn't work, you have nowhere else to go. They should have, like, the Magic just acquired Colin Castleton. We've been waiting for them to sign him to a two-way. They haven't done that yet. And it's just like, what's the point? Like, this is a tool. You're supposed to, like, you use it. Like, I would say they've completely mismanaged their two-way slots this year.
100% agree.
Pushing that to the side for now. I think that the Magic will fish around for some big fish, or relatively big fish. Not like Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, big fish, or Brandon Ingram, big fish, but like Simon, Sexton, that kind of level. But I think that knowing this front office, they're going to let this play out. Paolo and Franz are still working their way back in. They probably don't want to add another like kind of curveball to the chemistry. Like the team has to reestablish its chemistry again. I think that the team is, especially, knowing how this team has acted and some things I've heard about this front office in previous years around previous deadlines, there's always been a little bit of a fear of breaking this group apart. They know what's going to have to happen. The players know what's going to have to happen. But like doing that in the offseason is a lot easier than doing it midseason. And with everything this team has gone through this year and how this group has kept this season alive, I think that it would rub some people the wrong way, or, it wouldn't sit right with a lot of people, I think, to say, hey, thanks for keeping us afloat for sending you to Utah for Colin Sexton. Like Cole Anthony is an emotional center for the team. He's really popular in that locker room. He's, an energy guy. Yes, he's not a perfect player and he may not be with this team when they kind of take that next leap. But I would be a little bit afraid of trading him mid-season for that reason.
Can I rebuttal that for a second?
Sure, go for it.
I hear that, and there's a lot of things I actually really agree with. Culture of Cole Anthony, how long he's been with the team, the energy, and just the kind of person he is. He's a very good guy, very respected person in that locker room. There's moments where you'll see, like, before game, they're doing their team, like, hype circle, and he's the center of it, getting everyone hyped up. He is very important. But at the same time, I think you go get a guy for that second unit that's an upgrade over Gary Harris and Cole Anthony, and that's also a sign of, to the other teams, okay, we are moving on from someone, but that's because we believe in you so much. We want you to have better talent around you, right? And so there's that other perspective where it's like,
I mean, and there's this, at some point you got to be ruthless.
Yeah,
like this is a ruthless business. This is a hard, difficult, ugly business at times. And I respect Jeff Weltman because he has built a real family atmosphere. The players love being here. That, he has rewarded players who have stuck with this team, who have helped build this team. But the reality is, we all know it, the group that we have is not enough to win a championship. And so at some point, you are going to have to make that difficult decision. You're going to have to make that trade that's going to feel really ugly and feel really dirty and not be kind to the person because it's the right thing to push this team forward. And maybe that is this deadline. Maybe that is in the next week. I am only skeptical of it because Paolo and Franz are still working their way back. I think that is a bigger factor than anything else. Having them on minute restriction and then adding a new player, kind of starting from scratch with a really important piece. I think that would be a little bit of a wrench that could throw things off, especially with where they're at in the standings. If they were in the 4 seed or in the 5 seed knocking on the door to the 4 seed, I think there would be a better chance of them making a deal. If they were in the 8 or the 9, and maybe they will be by the time, hopefully not, but maybe they will be 8th or 9th, when the trade deadline comes around and the shooting is just so bad and they're like, we can't wait. We have to get a shooter that's just gonna change things a little bit and change the environment. Then maybe you do it. Look, if not, I hope this doesn't happen. But if the Magic come out of the Detroit game, lose like the next 2 or 3, I think that increases the odds that a trade's going to happen. That they'll say, okay, it's time. We can't wait anymore. We got to do something. I don't sense that this front office is panicking. I think this front office believes they can get whatever they need to get done at the deadline. They can do it in the summer as well. I just don't sense the urgency to do something now, because the trade deadline is a little bit more about the now than it is the future. Yeah. At least for teams in the Magic's position.
I hope they're aggressive, because aggressive to an extent,
Just because you're aggressive doesn't mean you execute a deal.
Right. And it takes 2 teams to make a deal, right? We know that. Like
you can be aggressive and say, we will trade Cole and Gary with a first for Colin Sexton, and Danny Ainge just like, give me a first for Anthony Black. Give me a second first, or give me Anthony Black. And the Magic can say, we're not giving you Anthony Black. Like, sorry.
Yeah.
And then that ends it.
There's boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And also, it takes 2 to tango. Like teams just might not be interested in doing the type of business that the Magic want to do. And I do 100% tell people the Magic front office are active. They are talking. They are scouring the league left and right. They're not going to leave any page unturned going into February 6th. Yeah, and
they're focused. They know what they want.
They know what they're looking for. And so let's have fun. All right. We got a few minutes left before we wrap this podcast up. We've talked about Colin Sexton a little bit. I think we both know he's someone that I think would really help the second unit. There's Anthony Simons. Both of those guys probably going to take, you got to give up Cole and Gary Harris, and you got to hope.
I have run through with Colin Sexton. There is a way to do it without Cole Anthony, just numbers wise, but I don't know if Utah would go for that. And
what is it? It's like Gary Harris, and is it?
It's like Gary Harris, Jet Howard, and a first, and you take back Patty Mills or some small salary on top of that.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, when you get to trade season, think of before you've come up with your target list, then try and figure out if there's a framework for a deal. If you can kind of come up with the basic outlines of a deal. The rest is just details. The rest is just that's what you're negotiating. Is okay, Colin Sexton for Gary Harris is essentially the trade you're making. The question is that enough to get Utah to move? How many draft picks do they want?
Right.
Would they take a Cole Anthony? Would they take a Jet Howard? What players do they want to get rid of and send to you? That's the negotiating part. The framework, the 1-for-1 trade that you're trying to execute, that's the kind of thing. And I would say, with Utah especially, I don't think it's the case with Portland with Anthony Simons because of his salary. With Utah, there's absolutely that framework to say this deal can get done pretty quickly and pretty easily.
So who's on your list? Let's go. What are a couple of your top guys that you're targeting?
Colin Sexton's number 1 on my list.
Mine too.
I think that he just checks all the boxes the Magic are looking for. Before the season, everyone said the Magic need a point guard. I'm not sold they need a point guard, but they need more ball handlers and creators. They're not looking for a point guard who's just going to pound the ball into the dirt. Maybe a little bit more of an organizer, like Franz Wagner's kind of taken over the organizing role. They don't want a guy that's going to take the ball out of Paolo and Franz's hands. So you need a guard who can attack off the dribble, create for others, and be a spot-up shooter. Colin Sexton's shooting 41% on spot-up threes this year.
He's been a really good shooter for a couple of years.
He's been a good shooter for a couple of years, and he's a dogged defender. He will, he's obviously not in a situation right now where he has to play much defense. But even then, I think Utah's defense is better when he's on the floor. Now, he's probably playing with Walker Kessler a little bit more than other players, but we know Sexton, put him in a winning situation, in a winning role, he will play hard for you. And if you need him to take over a game, he can take over a game. So Sexton is by far my number 1 pick and my number 1 option if the Magic are going to attack the trade market this summer.
He's been shooting, by the way, just to say, he's a 38% from 3 for his career. The last 3 seasons have been 39% or higher. On where did those attempts go? Yeah, the last 2 years, to this year, almost 5 attempts per game. Last year, almost 4 attempts per game. He would fit very well. Who's number 2 on your list?
Number 2 for me is Anthony Simons. I think that I get why people like him. He is a volume 3-point shooter. He is a scorer. He can pass a little bit. He would give this team just a guy who's just a bucket. They need guys who are buckets. They need scoring. We know that. We're not pretending it. The only reason I have two reasons why I have Simons below Sexton. First is Simons just has never been asked to defend in his career. He's always played for Portland. On Portland teams, especially, that defense wasn't emphasized. It isn't like the Dane Portland teams when they were really, really good. They're Terry Stotts teams where they defended really well, or they defended well enough because of their offense. He's been with Portland coaches that defense was not emphasized at all. They just kind of rolled the ball out and scored. And look, he's pretty good at that. Like we saw him in Orlando, had a quiet 25. Like I was just like, oh, I thought they did a good job on Anthony Simons. I looked down, I was like, oh, he's got 25 points. Like he actually played really, really well. But he's just never been asked to defend. And he's always kind of had the tools to be a good defender. But generally, like, you either want to defend or you don't. You know, you can make a situation like Portland a good defensive situation. And I don't think Anthony Simons has ever done that.
No.
On top of his salary is $25 million a year.
Yeah, like, he's much more expensive.
He's a lot more expensive. This team is going to be in the apron after they sign Paolo Banchero to his extension. I don't really care so much about the tax. I don't really care so much about being in the first apron. This should be a first apron team. Like, they are good enough. You know, you have the salaries in place to make trades to continue building and growing the team. The Magic are going to be buyers for the foreseeable future in trade markets. So you need to just have tradable players in stock to trade when it's time. They will be a second apron team when they're winning championships. That's just the reality. That's what they should be. When you're a good team, you pay for it. I don't know if Anthony Simons is good enough to jump into that realm so quickly. Is what I'm thinking. Especially when Sexton's got one more year left on his deal. When you re-sign Sexton, you're probably not signing him to even as much as Anthony Simons is going to get. Maybe like a little bit more, maybe like 26, 27, maybe 28 million a year. Again, by then the salary cap's going to grow a little bit where that's a little bit more stomachable. And maybe that is the argument to bring Simons in, is because by the time you get to the end of that contract and you're really paying those apron penalties, $25 million is going to be nothing. So it's definitely a consideration. Those are the two big ones that I would target.
Not a Cam Johnson guy?
I am not a Cam Johnson guy.
Why? Let's hear it. Because I kind of was not, and then I talked to Keith Smith last week, and now I am.
Yeah, he made a really good argument and kind of swayed me on it too. At the end of the day, your two best players are Franz and Paolo, so there's no path for him to kind of be more than just a bench player. And you're never gonna let's say you trade for Colin Sexton. He's having a 30-point game. You can throw him in that starting group. Like Jaylen Suggs, you're not playing the end of the game. Or Kenny, you're not playing the end of the game. He can play with Paolo and Franz. At the end of the day, where you want to spend your assets is on guys that are going to make Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner's job easier.
That makes sense.
Not that Cam Johnson would not. He is an excellent shooter. He plays the same position. And the joke I've been making, we have a Tristan da Silva at home. Like, I know that Tristan isn't shooting as well as Cameron Johnson, but da Silva has shown enough to me so far through his rookie year for me to say I want to give that guy some room to get better and some room to prove himself. Now, maybe you give up Tristan da Silva for Cam Johnson so you can get that immediacy. I think they would end up doing a lot of the same thing. So I'm willing to wait out Tristan da Silva, then push my chips in for Cam Johnson.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Philip, it's exciting in like a little over a week. Yeah, this is the 26th right now. This coming out, listeners listening to this on the 27th. We're a little over a week out from the trade deadline day. We are going to learn a lot more about this team and the way this front office is thinking about this team come that day. And I'm excited. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to see hopefully some excitement, some change up. I would be ecstatic if Colin Sexton or Anthony Simons or even Cam Johnson, or shoot, even Malcolm Brogdon, but his salary is a little obnoxious. We didn't get into him, but if they did something like that to improve the and that's why I ultimately don't think he's the guy you can go chase him this summer. But I would just be excited to see something happen. I would be very disappointed if it was just to free up a roster spot for Trevelyan Queen. And ultimately, here's why, real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. You can only move salary filler once. And they do have multiple guys you can move, but Gary Harris is expiring this year. He's also expiring the season after that. So it's another opportunity to use on a team-controlled contract to go get after someone. Once you kind of get rid of Gary Harris, you kind of have to start looking at other players who might be more important to this team to fill that salary.
Gary Harris is a big trade chip. Any major trade that you are thinking about involves Gary Harris because the Magic are happy to get rid of him. He has a lot of flexibility, so whoever's acquiring him can dump him pretty quickly. So if there's a team that's looking to acquire cap room for whatever reason this summer, Gary Harris is a great guy. And so the Magic should be looking to maximize his value one way or the other. I agree completely with that.
So, we'll see what happens this year. I'm very much looking forward to kind of just seeing what we learn, and I'm looking forward to creating content around it too. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Philip, I really appreciate you coming on the show, giving me some moments of your time. As always, go ahead and fill in the people where they can find you.
Yeah, best place to find me, my writing is over at orlandomagicdaily.com. You can follow my podcast at Locked On Magic. We actually have a Locked On Magic daily newsletter as well, so you get a little bit more kind of bite-sized versions of things that I'm writing. You can subscribe to that at lockedondaily.com. Just find the magic on that. That's been a lot of fun to write. You get also like NBA perspective as well on that. You can also check out my Patreon page, Your Orlando Magic Hub, for even more Magic content. Write an extra article for you almost every day at this point, just to feed your Magic obsession. So you can find that at orlandomagichub.com. I think is where
it's one of my favorite Patreon subscribes. It'll be linked in down below. But yeah, it's one of my favorite Patreon pages that I'm a part of. So check them out. Philip, thanks for joining.
Patreon.com/OrlandoMagicHub. That's the URL.
It is.
I'm pretty sure. There it is. We found it.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another episode of The Close Up. Peace.